Now boarding our first class Ultra Gold passengers. Welcome into Other People's Shoes, the podcast that takes you on an extraordinary journey through the lives of others, where empathy knows no bounds. Your host, Neil Matthews, is absolutely thrilled that you're here. Please take your seat as we're about to take flight into season 16. Be sure to hold on tight, because Take Flight isn't just about the skies above. It's about the depths within. We'll dive headfirst into the stories of those who faced turbulence and yet found the strength to rise above it all. So grab your headphones and get ready to soar with us as we launch into season 16. Thank you for flying with us. Buckle up and let's take flight.
That is right. Let us take flight today. Now, for some of us on the West Coast, which I still think is perhaps the best coast, it is the coast that I don't have to wake up for as early because it is, in fact, my time zone, my coast. All my East Coast friends, yes, I do believe we still are in the best coast. Here's the cool part is we get to stay in the great Pacific Northwest, which is always exciting. As I said, I don't have to wake up early, have a good day, have the coffee. So let's sit back, relax. The cabin crew going to make their way through momentarily. So if you need a beverage of choice, they will be here to meet your needs. Help me welcome in my new friend, Allie, and a foreshadow. You're going to hear Allie in maybe an upcoming season or so. Here we are. Welcome, Allie. How are you?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, we were talking pre-flight. That's what we're calling the green room for this season. It seems very fitting. The pre-flight
checks,
show.
yeah.
Yes. And I joked with you, or maybe even declared to you, you are actually going to be voicing our introduction for our season, which is very exciting. And I had a couple of friends say that your voice sounded like AI and that I felt like maybe I misread. I don't know. So if I did, you can definitely correct me. It seemed like you were taken back by that.
I was upset, devastated. I've tried so hard to sound like a human. I want to sound like the robots. They're taking over my job, man.
So you do, in fact, really do exist and you really are real. I'm not just having an AI conversation right now.
No, absolutely real live person. I can make mistakes and everything.
We love to lead off every show with this question, and that's this. What style of shoe does Allie like to wear?
Sneakers most of the time. Only because they're just comfortable. I wore heels for 14 years working for the airlines, and I don't want to do that anymore. So yeah, really boring. Sneakers.
Are you allowed to tell us what airline you worked for?
Yeah, I don't work for them anymore. Yeah.
I didn't know if that was top secret,
No.
because these days apparently top secret things just get put in basements and sorry, we'll press forward.
No, yeah, I work for Virgin Atlantic out of London Heathrow and London Gatwick.
Everybody's going to be wondering, you're British.
I am, yeah. Not Australian, but I'm British.
And I made that mistake too. And you have a great reel on your Instagram that is actually so cute and so clever. And again, I want to acknowledge that too, that you actually have this little debate with some characters that you've created about your accent and why they're different. I just think that was very clever of you as well.
Oh, well, thank you.
Wearing sneakers, no more high heels. Is there a certain brand of sneakers? Because I'm kind of a sneaker nut.
Are you? I'm not very good with naming names. Hang on. They're On. That's who they are. It said it's 2 letters and it's on my shoe. On.
Oh, yeah. Those are really good. Those
I
are
love them.
I don't have those yet. I want to get a pair.
They're super comfy. And they're really good for the Pacific Northwest because some of them are like weatherproof, can go out and splash in puddles and all sorts.
Splash in puddles and sorts. I love it. Love it already. Well, Allie, help us with this. As we already mentioned, you were on cabin crew.
Yeah, I was cabin crew.
Now, help me with that. Why on earth would you or somebody else maybe want to go and do that?
Well, you know what? I was a bit lost when I was 21, didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't want to grow up, didn't want to sit in an office all day. I wanted to see the world. I didn't have a huge amount of money to be able to do that. I had spoken to somebody who was flying for a different airline in the UK back then, and he was telling me about how he was doing 5 nights in Orlando or 7 nights in Mauritius. And I thought, well, that sounds lovely. I'd love to do that. So I applied to the only airline was hiring at the time, which was Virgin Atlantic. And I got in. Back then, this was 2002. It was a really glamorous job back then. In fact, not done now, but I was weighed at my interview to make sure I was the correct weight. And you had to be the right height, but that's for safe. They wanted you to try the uniform on to make sure you looked good in the uniform. And they were very glamorous. And you were allowed to have a little bit of fun with the passengers, which was great. To kind of not play jokes on them, just play with them and give them a great start to their vacation. You get them ready for the good stuff with them. So I loved it back then. It was so much fun. And I got to see the world in my early 20s. It was unbelievable. Hiking in Utah Tower or going to the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And I'm like 22 years old and getting paid to do this. It's amazing.
Now, some of our lady listeners will really kind of push on that a second. They'll say, wait a second, they weighed you?
They did, yeah. I think I was probably one of the last few before laws came out and stuff. Yeah, that's what they used to do. And back in the day, yeah, a stewardess, as it was back in the sort of 70s, 80s, the minute they started, they were weighed. And if you put on a pound, you got a letter. They would weigh you before every flight. And if you got any bigger than you were supposed to be, then you were, told to lose weight, or else you're not going to be able to fly again. Sometimes you'd be taken off flights until you lost that weight. You had to retire by the age of 32. Can you believe it? For women, you also couldn't be married, couldn't be a parent or anything like that. You had to be single.
Why do you think they had so many requirements?
It was a different time back then. The stewardesses, especially when you think of like Pan Am, they were so glamorous and they were part of the cell. It was back in the days when it was just men flying. And if the women and children were flying, it was because the man was flying. So I guess the girls were there to put in, extra reason for people to fly. If you had the most glamorous girls, if you had the most beautiful, it would fulfill some sort of fantasy. Wouldn't fly now. But back then, that's kind of what people did. People weren't great back in the early days of anywhere.
No, I'm not familiar with that. I'm still a young 44-year-old. What do I know?
Yeah.
Do you have any moments where it was incredibly awkward for you as a cabin crew person?
One of the most cringeworthy things I ever had to do, there was a time mid-flight and people kept coming back to me going, there's a really, really bad smell around row 22. Someone's passing gas and you've got to stop it. How? You want me to stick a cork up it? What? I don't understand. So I had to go down to row 22 and it was horrendous. Gagging. Oh gosh, you could taste it. It was horrible. And I kind of pinpointed the culprit. Instead of trying to embarrass one person, asking, is everybody here okay? There's a really bad smell and I just want to make sure that nobody's ill or needs to speak to us in any way. Directing it at the guy, I know who it was, and kind of spritzing a bit of air freshener around just to kind of let the guy know they weren't as unoffensive as he probably thought. They weren't sneaky. They were full force and he needed to stop. And I think they did actually stop from that point. I had another time when I actually had to directly ask a person if they could go and wash in the washroom. I gave them some hot towels and you have to do it sympathetically. You can't just be horrible. I can't be like, you stink. Go. You have to say, I'm sure you've had a really long day. I know you've traveled far today. Can I offer you some hot towels? Take you up to the first class toilets if you wanted to freshen up a little. Here's some pajamas from first class. Because sometimes people just don't realize how bad their personal odor can be. And if you're sat next to that for 11 hours, because I did long haul. So, these people were coming from all over the world. Yeah, it's so awkward.
I would imagine you saw all walks of life, from young to old, different nationalities, considering where you're flying out of.
Yeah.
I would imagine that there are some amazing people that you've met along the way. Have you talk about a terrible story? Is there one that comes to mind that when you think about, it was really cool, I got to witness that or to see that, help this person, maybe the flip side of that?
There's so many of the nice times and they can range as small as there was a kid who was going to Orlando, but he had no idea. He thought he was flying to his grandparents' house. I don't know how they got him through the airport without clicking on that he was going to Disney, and then making that special announcement for him to say, hey, Johnny, you're not going to Granddad's house. You're going to go to Mickey Mouse's house in Disney, and just making little moments. So there's loads of little moments like that I love doing, helping somebody celebrate a wedding or a honeymoon or birthdays. We could make big deals of things for people. And then there'd be different times where you would sit. I had my best conversations sat at the bar and speaking to people at upper class who just these incredible life stories. Like I spoke to Louis Desposito, was one of my most favorite passengers. He's the executive producer of the Marvel films. And I just got to sit and talk with him as a normal person. I wasn't interviewing him or anything like that. I was just sort of, here, have a drink. And can I just say, I really like your work. I'm so cool thinking that you've done this. And then starting to ask him, so where did you start from? And I just really love talking to people about their entire life stories. People seem to open up in the air when they're talking to cabin crew. It's like a counselor or something, like they trust you. And there's lots of different things that happened throughout my career. The things that sticks with me is sometime I went to Johannesburg on Christmas Day, landed on Christmas morning. When I first found out that I was going to Johannesburg for Christmas, I was like, oh man, it's not very Christmassy there. It's hot. I wasn't feeling it at first. Then I asked the company, are there any children's charities we're supporting supporting there because I want to go do something nice on Christmas Day. They gave me the name of this orphanage. Well, I went to, there's a shop in the UK called Poundland. I guess it's like Dollar Tree. I went to Poundland and I just bought as many toys and toiletries as I could. I think I had like £100 or something, and I just bought as much as I could, put them into big red Santa sacks. And then I went to the orphanage when we landed in Johannesburg and took a few of the crew with me. And they knew we were coming. And when we got there, the kids arranged themselves to do this song and a dance for us when we got there. They were so excited watching them open these gifts. Like they cost like £1. It was nothing. They cost so little. This little boy was just holding this motorbike toy that I'd got him. Like he'd never seen anything like it before and he couldn't believe it was for him. They just kept on hugging us. There was a 2-year-old girl who was just gorgeous and she wouldn't let me go. I carried her the entire day. She just wanted to be on my hip. All of these children had lost their parents to AIDS and some of them had AIDS themselves. When our visit was finished, the orphanage itself was just so small and the kids were all sleeping on the floor and stuff. But they all seemed so full of life and so happy. And when we went home after that trip, I just sobbed because I thought, there's so many kids back at home in the UK who are throwing a tantrum because they didn't get the right games for their new Xbox or whatever it was. And yet these kids who have nothing, have so much joy and bring so much joy to other people. It just didn't seem fair. And it kind of opened my eyes to an awful lot of things. I talk about a lot. There are stories in your life that changed your way of thinking, that changed your path. And that's one of them for me. That kind of made me stop and go, wow, there's so much on this earth that we don't see and that is going on every single day. It's going on right now and we don't even think about it. Having a bit more of awareness of that, it just helps bring some perspective into life.
How old roughly were you around that time of Johannesburg, which by the way is in South Africa?
Africa, yeah.
Those geographically challenged folks will be like, cool, Johannesburg. Let me Google that real quick. I know it as being South Africa and you do as well, obviously. Roughly how old were you?
I was about 25.
I don't know at 25 if I would have had that mindset.
I probably didn't from before I started flying. 25, I had been promoted to manager. I had had one serious incident on board, walked the streets of most cities in the US, gone to Asia, Australia, Africa. And I do think that travel, and not just travel, but meeting people from different places that aren't your own, it expands your mind and expands your mindset, makes you think of different ways of living. It would be so interesting to know if I went back in time and I hadn't taken this job, what would I have been doing? What would I have ended up like? What would I be like now? These stories, they shape us.
I often ask that question, especially if it's a major junction in someone's life. I always say, there's that great movie Back to the Future. I'm sure you've seen it, maybe on a flight or two, or who knows, maybe even not on a plane. It's in those moments that I always think back, if you were able to go back in time, what does life look like if you don't take door number 2 or path number C, or switch those around? But it's fun to do that with your mind. Sometimes you're like, wait, that didn't jive. I mean, have you let yourself go down that road? If Allie doesn't do X, this doesn't maybe happen, or my perspective isn't shaped in this way?
Absolutely. It's almost, in fact, it's solely what I've been thinking about in the last sort of 6 months. Been thinking a lot about my memories of, especially of my time as flying, and I started writing them down. And I do this thing called wild writing, or it's sometimes called morning pages, where I just write my stream of thought. What came out of that most recently was this whole realization that if I hadn't had some of the things happen to me, even the stuff that at the time felt like the most devastating thing, if I hadn't had that happen, I wouldn't be where I am today. And that gives me a whole new appreciation.
I'm going so fast through life, so fast. Very few times that I have to sit down and say, okay, what happened there? I almost miss it if I'm not really paying attention. And I love the idea of sitting down every morning and saying, okay, what has happened lately? Where am I at? What thoughts am I having? And process through those, whether you do anything with it as a creator, such as yourself and myself. Just the idea and the exercise of being able to do that, I think is a great discipline to have. Where does that idea come from of creating that discipline in your life?
It's called The Actor's Way, which is a book that for the life of me now, I can't remember who wrote it. And she's really famous. But it's part of the creative process for her is morning pages. Her thing was to do it first thing in the morning, just get it all out and write for at least 30 minutes. I'm a mother of a 4-year-old. I don't have 30 minutes in the morning. I just ended up doing it whenever I really feel like it took me. For the first couple of months of this year, I did it every single day because I wanted to form it in as a habit. And now recently, it's if I really have to noodle on something, that's when I'll get my big old journal. But I think there's something, when you write something with pen on paper, you put a little bit of your soul into it. I feel like it's not as fast as typing. It's not as fleeting as making a voice note. When you have to actually put the pen to the paper and form the words yourself, a bit more of it goes in from there. And I feel like if had so many ideas just from sitting there thinking, writing whatever's in my train of thought. And sometimes it is just like, I can't think of anything. I'm really tired today. I wish I'd had that donut earlier. And then all of a sudden your mind just starts wandering and your pen starts wandering with it. And then you've come up with questions, that you wanted to ask, or I want to speak to my mum about this, or this would be a really great idea for a business. Or there's so many things that come out of it. It's not necessarily just a creative person's process. I think it's just good for getting out things that are in your brain that might not have come out if you don't noodle on it for a little bit.
I love the idea of doing it. What do you do if you're like me, who is a horrible speller, and then you spend half the time trying to think, okay, how do I spell that word? You get on the internet to try to spell it, and then it derails the thought.
It doesn't matter. No one is going to read it. Absolutely no one is going to read it. You probably won't even read it yourself. Just commit the thoughts to paper. If you don't know how to spell it, just spell it how it sounds in your head. I have a thing where my brain goes a little bit faster than my hand, and then I'll start writing words with the last letter of the word. Like I'm already a little bit ahead of myself, and I'm like, I'll have to do that again. But it doesn't matter. I make frequent mistakes. I cross things out. You just put in pen to paper because that's the process. It has to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be spelt right. It doesn't have to be anything. There's been times when I look back from the night before and I've been like really tired, or maybe I've had a few glasses of wine and I thought I need to do my pages, and I think, what on earth did I write down there? I've got no idea. I very frequently don't read a lot of the stuff that I've written, but sometimes when I've had a really good idea and I've gone back to it because I'm like, what was it that I was thinking? And it had already gone from my actual brain. Going back into my notebook, I'm like, oh yeah. That's actually brought on a couple of things that I've done recently with work, noodling away in my book and then had an idea and then remembered it a few days later.
Listen, I've already alluded to it. I love your voice. It's not an AI. I want to stress that again. She's not an AI. She's a real person. I mean, you go from this kind of amazing career of being always on travel, being always on the move, the excruciating process. I think some ladies would echo this of getting hired. Nobody wants to get weighed. I've never met a lady once who says, yeah, raising my hand, let me get weighed in public or by other people. It's usually a private thing. Press through to all of that. And then you get into voice acting or voiceover work. How do you make that transition work into where we are now?
I used to be an actor when I was a teenager. I did some TV, I did some stage, I was in Shakespeare, I toured, and that was all I wanted to do. I got told this was sort of the late 90s, and I was about 18 years old when I got told by some casting directors and agents that the trouble is you're just not beautiful and you're not unusual looking, you're just quite normal and we can't cast you in anything. Quite overweight at the time as well. I was a bigger woman as a teenager. And I was like, okay, fine. And that's one of the reasons why I quit acting and went into flying, is because I was thinking, well, I'll leave the acting for now and then I'll come back when I'm 30 and it doesn't matter what I look like because I'll be playing the mum roles. So that was my full intention. I went away from acting and then I started telling people, like at the airline, if people said, oh, what did you do before this? I'd say, oh, well, I was an actor, but I wasn't very good because look at me now. I told it so many times to people as a joke. Oh yeah, well, I was rubbish, wasn't I? Because not exactly on the screens now, am I? It just became true for me. When I hit 30, I was the biggest I'd been and I wasn't going back into acting. But I thought, do you know what? I'm gonna lose some weight. Turning 30, I'm gonna make some changes. So I lost the weight. I went on Weight Watchers. Other weight loss plans are available. I lost like 40 pounds. I felt great. Weight Watchers then asked me to be one of their faces in the UK for their commercial in 2012. And I was like, that's exciting. Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. I used to do acting, and one of the biggest commercials at the time, it was a 3-minute long commercial to be aired on New Year's Day. It involved a popular pop star over there called Alicia Dixon, who'd written this song about Do It My Way. And all of the people were real Weight Watch losers. We danced in the streets and lip synced to her song. And it was a great commercial. It was so much fun. It was a whole 2 days of filming, and I was back on set and I got this buzz in my stomach and I was like, I remember this. I'm on stage again. I'm in front of the camera again. And I loved it. I loved being part of crew like that. And then I got asked to do some voiceovers for the commercial. So one time they picked me up from the airport in my uniform. I'd got back from San Francisco and got straight taken in a limo to the recording studio, recorded an advert, loved it, and just loved being behind the microphone. And as the engineer was showing me out after the session, I can't believe you're not getting paid for this. You should do this for a job. And it made me think, I'd love to do that. Is this a job? This is a real job? Yeah, people do do this. So I kind of looked up some classes in London and took a few classes. Again, I was still very much, well, I'm going to be rubbish and no, I can't do this. I'm just a flight attendant. It's fine. But I'll do this for some fun. And then I kind of gave it up. My fiance at the time was like, look, there's no point following this. You can't do it. You're flying and you don't give up a good job like flying to kind of follow this dream that probably won't work out. Gave it up. 3 months before my wedding day, I had this sudden realization on top of a mountain in Vancouver that I was making a horrific mistake. Like the world dropped from me. The curtain had dropped and I was like, holy moly, I can't do this. This is not me. I'm going to be miserable. I'll be divorced within a year or I'll get pregnant and be a single mum within 2 years. So I went home and discussed with my fiance these feelings. And after a month, we split up, kind of split up just before the wedding day. And I was at a very low point for about a year. Very, very low self-esteem. Didn't know, what I'd done and thought, I wouldn't probably get any better and didn't really have very high thoughts about myself. So I was an idiot for a year. And then it was my birthday. I was 34 years old and I turned up at the park with some wine and cheese, waiting for my friends to turn up. And they didn't. So I just cheesed and drank the wine. And they did come about an hour later, but they were all late. Point, I was already wallowing in self-pity. I kind of went home, and on my way home, staggering back home, I came across this man on the road, elderly man, unconscious in the middle of the road. Kind of went up to him, called for some help, got someone to call an ambulance and divert the traffic around him while I just tried to rouse him, wake him up, and I did my flight attendant thing, checked, because we're all medically trained, so checked for his injuries. He had an injury on the back of his head, so he had some clothes that I just used to hold the back of his head. And I just spoke to him and he was like just telling me about the war, and he didn't seem to be thinking he was going to be around much. It was like he just looked in my eyes and just talked to me. Again, it was another one of those moments that stopped me and thought, what am I doing? I packed the guy after the ambulance came, he packed off to hospital, and I just carried on staggering home with this new thought. And I got home, had a really good cry, and then thought, enough, I'm not doing this anymore. This is not going to be my life where I'm drunk, self-pitying, miserable, and not doing anything about it. I made a list of everything that I wanted, everything I wanted out of life, wildest dreams, what I wanted out of life. A week later, I met my now husband, who was about 50% of the things I'd written on this list. He was creative, he was kind, he was communicative, he was encouraging. We just fell in love very quickly. About 6 months after, there was redundancies coming up in my airline. And he said to me, well, if there's anything that you could do, if money didn't matter, anything you could do, what would you do? And I said, I'd be a voiceover artist. And he said, well, let's make that happen. And he bought me a microphone, shoved me in the closet. And not literally. No, I did go in the closet where my studio was. I learned how to be a voiceover artist. I invested all my time, all of my redundancy money. And within 6 months, I was a full-time voiceover artist. It happened.
Again, I look at these moments in our life and in your life, the little new chapter. Your friends show up late. What if they were on time? Mm-hmm. You never meet that man.
Yeah.
You never potentially save his life. Now, listen, I know you're not a lifesaver per se. You cared enough. I mean, how many other people probably passed this guy before you stopped and did something?
Yeah.
Never even been to London, BTW. It's on the list. I feel like if I go there, I'm going to have to drink tea a lot. So maybe you could dispel that for me. Or I'm going to have Dalmatians somehow.
It's not a rule. You're fine. Don't worry about it. But you do have to drink warm beer. Sorry.
I don't even like cold beer. So there's that. I think of the little nuances and the little winks and the little universe, God, whoever, that points you back on that trajectory of what you were meant to do and what you were created to do.
Now I'm more open to that. It was like on top of that mountain in Vancouver, that's what I saw. It was the paths that I had, the options that I had, and I had been very blind to them for so many years. I didn't listen to my gut for so many times. And now I feel like I genuinely do know how to follow my gut, and I look for opportunity. And the minute your eyes are open to that, there's opportunities everywhere. A year before all this happened at the company, there was a guy one of the loveliest guys you'd meet, who flew for the airline. He was really tragically killed whilst crossing the road in St. Lucia, down route. So he was at work. He'd just had a baby. He had a beautiful wife, and his life was just over. And that was one of the first things that triggered me to think, life is so short. It's so beautiful, but it's so short. You have to take every single opportunity. I don't want to get to whatever age I'm allowed to get to and be like, oh man, I wish I'd done that. I can't imagine having regrets. I don't want to have regrets. And it's never too late. I have a lot of technical regrets up until the age of 34. If I hadn't done all those stupid things, if I hadn't made all those mistakes, if I hadn't doubted myself, criticized myself, or made wrong choices or disrespected myself, then I wouldn't be who I am today with this, whatever, how many long days, weeks, months, years of future I've got left. If I hadn't have done all that, it's never too late to make changes.
So we've been centering around this statement on the show, and I've been sharing it on different episodes. It says, pain has a way of clipping our wings and keeping us from being able to fly. And if left unresolved, you can almost forget that you were created to fly in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about when you hear that?
I think that a lot of times I felt like that. Like there'd be stuff going on. Nothing too seriously. People go through absolute horrific circumstances that I have not experienced. Mine's probably more a general experience that an awful lot of people had. I hadn't found love. I felt disrespected by a lot of people. Was lonely more than anything. I was very lonely for most of my sort of 20s and early 30s. I suffered from anxiety and depression. Wallowed a lot. And that was my pain. And it did clip my wings. I would continue to wallow. I almost reveled in being the victim. That was my excuse. It was my reason for why life was so terrible. Things always happen this way. I mean, my surname's Murphy. I used to say, oh, well, it's Murphy's Law. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen to me. And it would, because I made it happen to me, basically, by just continually experiencing things in that way. One of the most amazing realizations I had was I have control of the way I experience things. Speaking to the most incredible man last week, Dave Sanderson. He is a coach now. He's a speaker now. He's a very inspirational man, helps the Navy SEALs and helps people overcome adversity. He was in a plane crash and survived. He was in the Hudson River plane crash. I don't know if you remember that, back 2009. And he said to me, somebody will get on that aircraft and be, oh, I'm going to watch this movie and a bit uncomfortable, but I'm going to my destination. That's fine. Someone else will get on that aircraft being, I'm terrified. I'm going to die. I've been in a crash before. It's the same experience. They're both experiencing the exact same thing. Their experience of it is different. Now, what he does is he has been in a plane crash, has looked death in the face and survived it. So he changes his way of experiencing it. Same for me. I've gone back into my memories. I've changed the way that I've experienced the bad things that happened to me. Yes, they were terrible at the time, but now when I look back at it and think, yes, this was bad, but this is what I became because of it. You change your experience of something. If something happens now, if Ali's mindset from 10 years ago came along and, I don't know, say you wake up in the morning, you stub your toe, and then your clothes get caught in the door handle, it puts a rip in them, then you spill coffee all over yourself, and then you're stuck in traffic that day. All of those things, if you experience it in negative mindset like I had, I'd be like, well, this is terrible, and this is how my day's going to be, and I bet you something else is going to happen now. And you know what it will. You will experience it different. If you wake up in the morning, you stub your toe, and you go, oh, that was silly, and then get on with your day. Clothes snag and it makes a hole and you think, oh, that's frustrating, but I'll just go and put another top on. Your day's not as bad still. If you're stuck in traffic, you think, do you know what? Yeah, this is annoying that I'm stuck in traffic, but hey, I get to listen to this podcast I wouldn't have got to listen to before. Long episode today, so that's great. I always now think there's just a reason for everything. And if you just experience it not from a place of negativity and frustration, from a place of, well, what opportunity is this going to give me? It just changes the way, even if it means nothing, even if you don't, go on a different path that day because of the ripped clothes or the spilled coffee or the traffic. Isn't that a better way to live a day than to be constantly feeling victimized by life?
I would hope so. I think there's people out there that would be like, well, that's great for Ali.
Yeah.
So good for her. It's the accent. That's what gets it going. If I had her accent, my life would just be better.
The British are famous for moaning. Totally get that. Especially because there's really terrible things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like suffer through something horrific, a death in the family and be like, well, this had to happen. That's not what it's about. It's more just, I'm not very great at explaining it. I am not a coach. I am not someone who is trained in any of these things, kind of trying to, in my own weird way, explain my experience of things. Just after I left flying, I went through something called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And that's where I learned about changing the way that I viewed things that happened in my past and putting myself in different places, attaching different emotions to memories than the ones that were damaging me or harming me or stopping me from becoming who I wanted to be. I had a lot of limiting beliefs. I had kept on telling myself that I wasn't worth these things. I wasn't worth good things happening to me, or I wasn't smart enough, or I wasn't talented enough. I told myself all of these things, which they put a limit on what I could do. The minute I started caring for myself in that way, looking after my mental health, looking after the way that I saw myself, telling myself for the first year I had a mantra, I am successful, I am worthy, I am kind. And I made myself feel the thing. I didn't just say them. I lay there and thought, okay, how does it feel to be successful? I lay there and I thought, how does it feel to feel worthy. The kindness, that was a part of me. I feel like I have been kind in my life. I am somebody who stops if someone needs help. I am somebody that can't walk by somebody if they need me. I will sit with a homeless person and chat to them. Everyone's walked past them that day. I want to be a kind person. So that's something that I want to keep from my past. I am successful. I am worthy. I am kind. And those are good things to be. And I am those things. And once you tell yourself and feel those things enough, you become them.
I hope people hear that they don't get just mesmerized by the accent.
I could just sit here and read the phone book, couldn't I?
You could. You could. I was going to say that, but I didn't know if that would be okay to say or not. When you think back over the span of your life, is there any way you'd go back to middle school and tell young Allie something? And if you did, what would you tell her? Wait, do you have middle school in Britain? I don't even know.
No. You just go straight from juniors to senior school. Still learning the American school system. It baffles me. Obviously, part of you is, I want to go back and tell little Allie to keep on following her dreams, or to know that it's all going to be okay. And if I hadn't experienced all those things, would I be okay? Would I be where I am today? I think a lot about it with my son. I have a 4-year-old son he's a highly sensitive, beautiful boy, creative, takes things really to heart. All I want to do is protect him. I don't want him to feel a moment of pain in his life. Then I'm also acutely aware that the mistakes I've made in my life taught me how to be who I am today. So I can't stop my son from making mistakes, or from having his heart broken, or from feeling frustrated. I can be there to support him, and I can be there to give him tools to make it work for him. So that's maybe all I would take back to myself, is maybe give myself some tools. But again, would I have those tools? It's that classic sliding doors moment. So no, I wouldn't go back and change anything, because it's where I am today. I would love to have had another 10 years with my husband before we had kids. I think we probably both would have annoyed each other if we'd met ourselves in our 20s. So, it's one of those things. Can hopefully give my son the support he needs to make his own mistakes and to learn from them and to be his most amazing self, hopefully a little bit earlier than when I did it.
Well, maybe not something you would change, because I do agree with you. The good, the bad, the ugly that we walk through, and I'm saying we as in like you and I, that we've walked through, I think did make and shape and mold us in some respects.
Yeah.
What did that younger Allie need that you think she didn't have, that you wish you could maybe give her?
Honestly, nothing. I had the most supportive parents, my mum and dad, everything right. They were supportive. They let me make mistakes. They let me follow my dreams. 15, they let me travel up and down United Kingdom performing in a Shakespeare show. I mean, that's incredible. I'm so happy. I'm fearful that I'll have to do that one day and let my son go up and down the country at 15. Mum and dad let me do that, and they gave me nothing but love and support. So I honestly don't think I needed anything. I'm a sensitive person like my son is. I think the benefit of modern day today is that we have more awareness of mental health and of things like anxiety. I suffer from anxiety. I'm also a positive and successful person. It's not a one size fits all thing that anyone who has any mental health issues is looks like this or feels like this or acts like this. So that's the one thing I'm grateful today. And maybe that would have been great back in the 80s, is to have more awareness of mental health. And I'm hoping that the future generations aren't going to have to go through the things that maybe you and I did. And hopefully that will be over now. That's the only thing I'd say. Yeah, more mental health support.
Favorite moment in acting was what for you?
That's really hard. When I was a teenager, I was in a TV show in the UK called The Grimleys, and that was my all-time most favorite thing that I did on screen. It was funny.
Can we find it? Is there any clips of this?
I think I put a clip on my Instagram, if you go real far back. But yeah, it was set in the 70s and it was hilarious. It was funny. And I got to hang out with famous actors from the UK, and we all stayed at the same hotel, and I felt very grown up. I shared a dressing room with Amanda Holden, who is now like a really big star in the UK. So I was like, oh my gosh, I did her bra up for her in 1999. So that is one of my favorites, because it was my first job and it gave me so much, this is it, I've made it. Acting wise and voice acting wise, I don't think I've yet to do my most favorite job. I think there's still stuff that's going to come out, hopefully. I've done things that I've loved doing, like part of a cult game called Bendy in the Dark Revival. The fans from that game are just amazing. Like, I've never experienced anything like that before. Like, people making art of my character and of me. Like, someone did my character as a flight attendant. It was hilarious. It's so good. And so that's also been a wonderful experience. But yeah, I don't know. I want to do more stuff. I haven't done my favorite job yet.
We talk about your voice acting. We talk about, you just started a podcast too. Mm-hmm. Has that been fun for you to start that type of process, or has it been nerve-wracking? Or help me with that.
I have loved every single second of this stressful but yet creative time. So I have a podcast, the Red Eye podcast, it's a storytelling podcast. So it's basically like little audiobooks, little audio short stories. They're all true stories from my days of flying, and they're from my friends to the world now. I'm interviewing people all over the world who have flown or are still flying, and they're telling me their stories told in the style of a short audiobook style fictions, little 20-minute podcasts. And been without a doubt, that's my most favorite job so far, although I'm not making any money out of it yet. But it's so much fun to go back to these times, because let's face it, most of the stories are from sort of the 90s, 2000s, early days for me. And then going back, I've spoken to people who flew in the 70s, 80s, and that's been so much fun. And I think that's where all the fun was had. That's when all the fun was had in the airlines, in those decades. Now it's all very much, you can't do anything without getting fired, or you can't have too much fun. I've loved the whole process. I love the creativity side of it. I've been producing it myself, so I've really enjoyed doing sound design. Fiddled with sound designers in my time as a voiceover. Now I get to actually put stuff out there that I've designed, which is love that. Really like marketing, which is weird. Never thought I would, but I love marketing. So this has been really good for me. It's like working on the branding, do little Instagram and YouTube short comedy sketches, which have been really fun to try and get my stuff out there, really. This has been my most favorite thing so far, is just meeting all these people, having incredible stories to tell. I mean, some of them are just unbelievable, but they all are true. They all are true. It's been fun.
I had a guest say that podcasting is a lot like pen pals. Sometimes you meet somebody, you connect with them, and they kind of become a pen pal of old. And I just thought, that's so fun to think about. So I would just encourage you, the folks that you meet, I mean, you're going to meet some incredible people. I think everyone should podcast.
It's like therapy.
It kind of is, a lot of respect. It is. No, you're absolutely right on that. I absolutely love it. Are you allowed to talk about any brands that you've voiced for, or is that, again, top secret?
They're only top secret if they tell you they are. So far, I've worked for Alfa Romeo. Is that even a car in the States? I don't know if it is.
I've never heard of them.
It's a European car.
Yeah.
Yes. Alfa Romeo. Done little things for like McDonald's and Swarovski, BMW. And yeah, I work a lot in travel, which is ironic. Or is it just a coincidence? But yeah, I work a lot for like doing different hotels, especially like luxury brands and stuff like that. I love it all. Especially love the travel stuff. Doing things like that makes my heart sing, especially if I can be a bit more. I did a great little commercial for the islands of Guernsey, which again, you've probably never heard of. They're in the UK. There's little islands around the UK, and there's little islands of Guernsey. It's like a little tropical paradise south of the UK. And I got to have fun with that one. I got to really kind of be a bit cheeky and I like doing that.
Do you have a favorite British entertainer?
I love Olivia Colman. She is the queen. I mean, she did play the queen, but she's just so inspirational. She's funny, she's talented, she's witty, she's down to earth. I just love her. I think there's nothing she can do wrong. She's brilliant.
I really was hoping you were going to name one of the Spice Girls.
Well, that and, Sporty Spice.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love Sporty Spice?
I don't love Sporty Spice. She wasn't my favorite.
No.
Anyway. Well, Ali, before we let you go, where can folks go to not only hear your voice work if they're interested in that, maybe also, I think the podcast is up and running. Where can folks go to hear that as well?
Interested in the voiceover work? If you go to www.alimurphy.co.uk. Sorry, it's .co.uk, not .com, because, British and all that. And then if you're interested in the podcast, it's www.theredeyepod.com. And you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. So, yeah.
We're so good with that. Well, we do this thing at the end of the show. It's called Senseless. I mean, forgive me, it might be a wasted thing here. Are you into college basketball at all?
Am I into college basketball? I didn't know college basketball was a thing till you just said it. So just basketball in colleges?
Yes, correct. In your backyard, being in Washington, there's a University of Gonzaga. Have you heard of them at all? They're the Bulldogs.
No, terribly sorry.
That's right.
Oh, hang on. Huskies, is that a thing? Go
yes.
Huskies.
Yes, the Huskies are a thing. They're in Seattle. Yes, there
you go.
And they're purple. They wear purple. Yeah.
Yeah. Go Huskies.
You knew that.
Is that basketball? I feel like that's football.
They do
everything.
Yeah. They do have a basketball team. They're in the Pac-12. How long have you been in the States?
18 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And the first 12 months was mainly taking up just trying to figure out what brand of tomatoes I needed to buy. And also calling them tomatoes and not tomatoes because no one understands me. So yeah. So now I can, last year tomatoes, this year college sports. There you go. That's what I'll learn.
18 months. I thought you'd been here longer than that for some reason.
No, just a little while.
Well, you like Starbucks then, being in the Washington area, right?
If they're listening, they're great, and I'd love to be their voiceover for them. But honestly, I prefer Woods Coffee. That's a nice Seattle brand over here. Mercury Coffee is a lovely Seattle brand.
I could hear you doing a coffee commercial.
There you go.
I could hear
Nescafe.
you. Yeah, I could hear you doing it. We roll a die in this cup here that is a college cup. So it's the Tar Heels, which are out
Go Tar Heels.
Yeah, there you go, which are out in North Carolina, which is weird because I'm in Oregon and you're in Washington. You're like, how does he like North Carolina? It's a really long story. So anyway, all right, here we go. You got number 1, which looks like a North Carolina logo, but I promise you it is a number 1. All right, so rank these from worst to first. Worst thing to the best thing. All right. So here we go. Flight themed questions, by the way. So here we are.
Okay.
So worst again to the best. So taking off, landing, or during the flight. Now, from the cabin crew.
Doing the flight, takeoff, landing.
Okay. So during the flight is the worst for you?
Yeah, that's the most amount of work. Yeah.
Okay. And then what would you say next? So during the flight?
Takeoff.
Take off. Why is that second worst?
Well, because landing, I'm finishing work and you're in a destination.
So in your mind, if we're on a 3-passenger seats, so there's 3 seats. So we got the aisle seat, we got the middle seat, and we got the window seat. Which is the best seat?
I like the window because then I can lean my head on the window.
From a cabin crew standpoint, which one?
The window, because then you're not going to get your ankles kicked by the cart.
I hate the cart, by the way.
I know, we do too. It's really heavy.
I hate the cart. Allie, I do want to say thank you so much for what you shared. I really appreciate the insight that you gave us. I value you and what you shared. And I just wish you all kinds of success in not only your voice work, but your show as well.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, guys and gals, kids and campers alike, we're on to our final destination next week. Don't worry, if you loved Allie like I did, stick around. She's actually going to voice our intro. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. She really is. She's that talented. So I'm wondering about that for you. Speaking of talent and all things related to that, what's your secret hidden talent? I know it seems like a weird segue, right? Hang with me. What is it? When I was a kid, I wanted to be David Copperfield. I thought he was the coolest. I thought magic would be fun. I could entertain my family. I could entertain the neighbors. I never pursued it. You know why? Because somebody came along and told me that I would be awful at it. So I'm wondering about that for you right now. Are you like me? Are you like Allie in that respect? Somebody has come along somewhere and said, yeah, you should not do that. You're awful. And who has the power and the right to say that? To ground you, to put you in the corner, to say, nope, you don't get to do that. Who gets to have that power? Good question, right? Who have you given that power over to, maybe even? Well, just think about that today. Let me know if that's you, and maybe we can get you some help in that regard. Let me know. opspodcast.com. Gonna let us know on those socials at OPS Podcast Show. Don't forget this. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned until next week when we walk in other people's shoes.